I stood outside the study door, holding a cup of chamomile tea I had just brewed for my husband. Then I heard his voice through the door, warm, sweet, full of affection he hadn't shown me in 2 years. You are my true love. As soon as I drain all her assets, I'll divorce her. Fooling her is a piece of cake. My knuckles turned white around the saucer. I had only wanted to bring him tea. Instead, I heard the most honest thing he had ever said to me. I set the cup down on the hallway table and walked quietly back to our bedroom. My heart was pounding, but I didn't shed a single tear. They say when the pain reaches its peak, the tears dry up. I sat in front of the mirror. Audrey Reynolds, 30 years old. 10 years of marriage. And in this house, I had become a joke. I reached into the back of a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. A divorce settlement I had quietly prepared over the past 3 months, reviewed clause by clause with my lawyer. William had no idea the wife he thought was so easy to fool had already been 3 steps ahead of him. I took a breath, walked to the study, and pushed open the door. William spun around, phone still at his ear. When he saw me lay the papers on his mahogany desk, his expression shifted from surprise to confusion to a strange kind of relief. Sign, I said simply. He laughed. Audrey, I think you misunderstood. That was just a client. Madison Blake, 25 years old. Your personal secretary. You've been together 2 years and 3 months. Last month you bought her a condo in Tribeca, using our marital funds, which means I have the right to claim it. The color drained from his face. You've been investigating me. I've been protecting my legal rights. He stared at me for a long moment, then smirked, picked up the pen, and signed without reading a single word. You can't live without me anyway, he said, flipping the folder shut. You'll come crawling back. A rich girl like you is nothing without this family. I picked up the signed agreement and smiled faintly. Thank you for your cooperation, William. I hope you and your secretary are very happy. That night, my body finally trembled. 10 years ended in minutes. But strangely, underneath the pain, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time.
Free.
My lawyer answered on the first ring. Mr. Donovan, it signed. Yes. Without reading it.
Perfect.
See you tomorrow morning. I opened my safe and pulled out everything I had spent 2 years collecting. Hotel receipts, bank statements, call recordings. I traced my fingers over those papers and remembered William proposing under cherry blossoms, the love in his eyes, so convincing. I used to think that love was real. Now I knew better. The next morning, my best friend Lauren arrived at 8 with 2 coffees and sharp eyes. Did the bastard sign it? I handed her the agreement. She skimmed it and broke into a grin. He waived all rights to the estate and everything in it, and he doesn't even know this house has always been in your name. She looked up at me. Audrey, are you sure? Once we file this, there's no going back. I walked to the window and looked at the roses William had planted in the garden at the beginning of our marriage, when he still tried. That road closed 2 years ago, the first time he cheated. Lauren nodded slowly. Then she pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were photographs. William and Madison at restaurants, hotels, the movie theater we used to love. On my birthday, while he claimed a work emergency, he had taken her to Cabo, using money from our joint account. My fingers trembled, not from sadness, but from a cold, focused rage. When William walked through the front door minutes later, dressed sharply as always, he didn't expect to find Lauren there. Audrey, are you ready? Mom's waiting. He forced a smile. I apologized for last night. Last night, I said calmly, when you called me an old hag and bragged about draining my assets? His face turned red. He glanced at Lauren and lowered his voice. Let's talk privately. No need. I pressed play on my phone. His voice filled the room clearly, every ugly word. The color left his face completely. I held up a copy of the divorce agreement. You've already signed it. The estate is mine. The rest of the assets split evenly. If you'd like to contest that in court, I don't mind a judge hearing about Miss Blake. William stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Then he straightened, tried to recover his old arrogance, and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the walls. Lauren and I exhaled at the same moment. "What a relief," she whispered. I sank into the sofa. 10 years of feelings, gone just like that. I wasn't without nostalgia, but logic had long since told me this marriage should have ended long ago. And if you've ever had to walk away from something that once meant everything to you, you already know exactly how that feels. William thought the estate was his, because he had paid the HOA fees and utilities for years. He had never once looked at the deed. It was a wedding gift from my father. It had always been in my name. I sold it for $5.5 million, all cash, closed in a week to a tech entrepreneur from Austin with zero ties to the Carsons. When my mother-in-law showed up at the front door with 2 bodyguards, demanding I open it, I slid a copy of the deed through the crack beneath the door and watched through the security camera as her face went from red to white to ash. "You planned this from the beginning," she screamed. "Mother-in-law," I said through the intercom. "Who is it that insisted so heavily on this marriage? Who said the Horizon Corp heiress was the perfect match for the Carson name? Isn't it ironic that you're the one accusing me of fraud?" She threatened to break down the door. I told her I was dialing 911. Her bodyguards hesitated. She left. My hands were shaking, but my mind was calm. The Real War had only just begun. My father had received word that the Carsons were working with several major banks to force a liquidation of a factory I co-owned, the factory that had been part of my dowry that they had managed for years. When I reviewed the report they had filed, the numbers were completely fabricated. A factory that had expanded its production line just last quarter was suddenly shown running at massive losses for 2 years straight. They weren't just after the estate. They wanted everything. But within the walls of Carson Enterprises, I had already made a quiet ally. Claire Mitchell, their finance director, had worked there for 10 years. She had watched the Carsons cook their books, funnel company money into offshore accounts, and bribe city officials for the biggest urban project of their careers. When she was diagnosed with a tumor and asked for a month's medical leave, William told her to be back in a week or not come back at all. She had been waiting for the right moment to do the right thing. At a quiet corner booth in a cafe near Central Park, she slid a thick envelope across the table. Real accounting ledgers. 2 sets of books. Nearly $20 million funneled out of my factory into a shell company. And more, Carson Enterprises had inflated their profits to secure fraudulent bank loans, with Madison Blake's father, a bank VP, helping them bypass regulations at every turn. William hadn't chosen Madison for her looks. He had chosen her for access. "Why are you helping me?" I asked quietly. Claire cleaned her glasses, a stalling habit I had come to recognize. Then she looked up. "I've spent 10 years watching them do this. My conscience was eating me alive. And honestly, when this blows up, I don't want to be the one left holding the bag." A bitter smile. "I want to sleep at night." I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. We arranged a safe way to stay in touch. She resigned the next day, citing health reasons. 2 days later, she was on a flight to Singapore, taking every crucial document with her, already smuggled out. I filed everything. The IRS, the SEC, the U.S. Attorney's Office, tax evasion, financial fraud, bribery, embezzlement, insider trading. By mid-afternoon, Carson Enterprises stock had hit its circuit breaker limit. Trading was halted. Reporters were swarming the building. And Commissioner Bradley, who owed my father a favor from 15 years ago, quietly suspended the bidding for the South Harbor Revitalization Project, the massive government contract the Carsons had sunk hundreds of millions into, the deal they needed to survive. Their lifeline was cut. That night, my father called. His voice was unusually grave. "Edward Carson suffered a massive heart attack. He's been taken to Mount Sinai. He's in critical condition." I sat down slowly. By 3 a.m, Edward Carson was gone. I had not wanted this. My original intention was to take back what was mine and make William face consequences for his betrayal, not to annihilate his entire family. I knew logically that Edward Carson's heart condition was chronic, that the Carsons had spent decades building a company on illegal foundations, that their collapse was the result of their own choices compounding for years. But a man was dead, And I was sitting in the dark with the strange, heavy weight of a victory that didn't feel the way I expected. The final divorce hearing lasted 3 hours. William arrived looking like a shadow of the man I had married. His suit was wrinkled. He had stopped shaving. His lawyer argued the settlement had been signed under duress and demanded its cancellation, even tried to blame me for Edward Carson's death. Mr. Donovan dismantled every argument cleanly, presenting the recording of William signing, calm and arrogant, not a trace of coercion in his posture. The judge ruled in my favor on every point. The estate and its contents were mine. William was ordered to return the $3 million he had moved offshore, plus $2 million in damages. The rest of the marital assets divided evenly, exactly as the agreement stated. William collapsed into his chair. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed from every direction. I stopped, looked into them, and said quietly, "Today, the law served justice. Now I'm looking forward to starting a new chapter." A week later, William called me from a coffee shop across the street from my building. His voice was barely recognizable, exhausted, stripped bare.
"Audrey,
"Please. The company is finished. My father is gone. I could go to federal prison. If you help me, say the evidence was exaggerated, that it came from a place of revenge, I'll do whatever you ask." I was quiet for a moment. "William, are you asking me to commit perjury for you? For 10 years of marriage? The 10 years when you were sleeping with Madison Blake? When you were calling me an old hag and planning to steal my assets?" He flinched. "You only realized what you had when you lost it," I said. "That's not love. That's regret." I set my cup down and walked out into the sunlight. There was no rush of victory, only a quiet, clean feeling, like the end of a very long storm. The FBI arrested William 2 days later at his office. Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, attempting to flee the country through illegal border crossings. Frank Russo had been helping him plan it before Madison sold him out. He pleaded guilty. 6 years in federal prison. Carson Enterprises filed for bankruptcy. Its assets were auctioned off to pay creditors. His mother moved into a small apartment in Queens. His sister took her children and moved to Ohio. And I went home. Not to the Greenwich estate. Not to the Carson family name. I went back to my father's factory. The one the Carsons had tried to destroy through falsified ledgers and dirty tactics. The one that still stood, brick by brick, exactly where we had left it. I used part of the estate sale to buy new equipment and restore the original buildings as a heritage site. On the day of the grand reopening, my father gave a speech about perseverance and justice. I stood beside him, eyes full, chest full. I also launched a legal aid foundation for women facing the same walls I once faced alone. Lauren called it my revenge fund. I thought of it as something better than revenge, proof that pain, when survived, can become purpose. A year later, Lauren dragged me to our college alumni reunion. "William just got out on parole," she said. "You have to show him who you became." I wore a simple crimson dress. I walked in half an hour, late on purpose. The room went quiet for just a second when I entered, then erupted into warmth. Near the end of the night, I stepped onto the terrace for fresh air. He followed me. He was gaunt. His suit didn't fit. His eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in them before. Genuine remorse, or maybe just loss.
"Audrey,
I've thought about nothing else for a year and a half. I was wrong. I was so wrong. If you could give me one more chance." I looked at him for a long moment. "William," I said softly, "you don't love me. You loved having me. There's a difference." I pulled my wrist gently from his hand. "I hope you find a way to look forward." I already have. On the drive home, Lauren asked me the question she had been holding all night. If you could go back, would you still have married him? I watched the city lights streak past the window. "Yes," I said. She hit the brakes. "Are you serious? Because those years made me who I am. The pain taught me how to grow. The betrayal taught me what I was capable of. Without all of it, I'd probably still be the naive, quiet Audrey who never once looked at a company ledger." Lauren was quiet for a moment. Then slowly she smiled. "You know you're a legend now, right? The woman who divorced William Carson and sent him to federal prison. I'm not a legend, I said, laughing softly. I'm just finally living the way I always should have. Independent.
Clear-eyed.
Answering to no one. Back at my Tribeca condo, I stood at the window and looked out over Manhattan, the same skyline I had stared at through the worst nights of the past year. The storm was history now. A calendar reminder lit up my phone. Tomorrow's board meeting at the factory. I typed back a quick confirmed and turned off the lights. The city glittered below me, steady and alive. Self-worth is not something anyone can give you or take away. That was the most valuable thing 10 years of marriage had finally taught me. And I intended to carry it with me for the rest of my life. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to tell me where in the world you're watching from, I'd genuinely love to know.